Right. I've covered Ukraine and Russia for probably ever since I started doing the Anglosphere. All of this stuff that's been going on overseas, it's just as important as the downfall of the American empire from the inside. This decaying empire is not just decaying interiorly, and you can see it through everything wrong with this country, whether it's abortion or pornography or mass immigration or these shit politicians that are being, spoon-fed to us. But you can also see it in the absolute total catastrophe of our foreign relations. Right now, Russia is doing a special military operation in Ukraine. They invaded Georgia in '08, and both of those are and were NATO candidates going back to the early 2000s after the Budapest Conference. And all of this stuff that's happening is now being, as Nick said, all of this energy that was focused on going exteriorly with the war on terror, because now we do consider Russia, Iran, Syria, and North Korea to be terror states. It's now being shifted inwardly. And their tactics have not changed because their tactics have worked for them for 80 years. And they will get the media to pollute the masses and do things they want them to do. They will prop up politicians that seem like a good candidate for the people to rally behind. They get the American versions of the Saakashvilis or the Zelenskys or the Poroshenkos. Who was the first guy? Turchinov. They will prop all of these people up and get them inside of America, whether it's someone like Ron DeSantis or Gavin Newsom or Bill Clinton. All these people, they will prop them up and they will get the people to go out there. Even to an extent, George Bush. As you said with the Brooke Brothers riot, they had people going in Miami-Dade and demonstrating inside of the places to get the election sent up to the Supreme Court to get canvassed. And they shift that energy inward using the media, using the masses, using their financial and diplomatic and political and all these other ties. They will use them and they will shift them inwardly. They did it in 2020 with Black Lives Matter. They co-opted that with the media, blew it up, got politicians on their side, and they literally rioted and spread terror in America. They burned cities, they killed cops, and you can compare these situations, just change the circumstance, the people, the location, with everything that was happening overseas. You can easily compare the Black Lives Matter revolution to something like Euromaidan. They had protesters with Maidan, Georgian and Baltic and American snipers shooting police officers and civilians to create a revolution. They did that interiorly when they had cops gas rioters off the lawns to get Trump to go and take a photo op or whatever in front of the St. John's Parish. They did the exact same shit overseas they do here. Same tactics, same ideas, same people, but they just do it inwardly and they use the figures they have on the inside to do it. Really, we got to learn how to counteract and to battle the color revolutionaries because their tactics are the same. We need to figure out how to battle them. And the solution that seems to be working is military force. Because what was the answer to Euromaidan? The annexation of Crimea, the Donbass Revolution, and then the special military operation earlier this year. What was the answer to the color revolution in Georgia? Well, it was a Russian military invasion and the freeing of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The Syrian uprising in 2011, the Arab Spring. The solution for that was a civil war. So what kind of solution are we going to figure out to do against the color revolutionaries interiorly? What is going to be our solution to this?
Yeah, it's difficult, and what's particularly pernicious about these color revolution tactics is they always rely on the false veneer or the perversion of populist instincts among the masses. Mm-hmm. Even Black Lives Matter was sold to the public as a unique injustice against all of us, right? They use this unifying language to touch on the I don't know if Black Lives Matter would have been possible in 2020 without the Trump revolution in 2016 kind of priming a lot of the public for unifying language. And you saw that in Ukraine as well. They actually pervert and misrepresent the national interest of citizens of these countries by telling them something that's distinctly against their interest with the veneer of interest. They say that, what you need to really be worried about is Russia. Like, don't you want to be independent? But they're not selling independence. They're selling joint membership and subservience really to Wall Street. And that's not how they sell that to the public, but they use a bank shot narrative. They use kind of a dark mirror and a false reflection. And they say, oh man, can you believe that you guys are about to fall back into the clutches of the Russian government? When they always have been under the natural sphere of influence of Moscow, but there was never any conflict and there was never any attempt from Moscow to restate and kind of position itself as the legitimate heir to the sphere of influence of the Russian Empire in that region until Western agitation was achieved through the false veneer of populism in those countries. That's what a color revolution is. And that's what, this is so compelling what you're seizing upon with the DeSantis campaign, is that is also the playbook there. Mm-hmm. That's the playbook they used against President Trump internally while he was president, while he was sitting in office.
Yeah.
Were mass events before Black Lives Matter. It was the Women's March or the Women's Movement.
Even Black Lives Matter in 2016 was effective. Like, remember they rioted in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Language, right? It is actually populist in what they're doing, but it's to mislead the public away from its own interests as citizens. It's to mislead the public in particular from issues of international relations. It's this absurdity to point out that, hey, like, what Moscow is doing is outside of your interests, but what's in your interest is actually coming from Wall Street. Like, it's an absurdity, but they never phrase it like that.
The debt slavery system, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the Bretton Woods system that they've established for the international order.
And that's what makes some kind of future solution very unclear, I think, to all of us, is that they really are aping the successful and unifying language of nationalism to put people into subservience to international systems. Mm-hmm. We see it with national conservatism as well. While they're anti-globalists and they're pro-protectionist and they're not nationalist, right? And they won't take that step. They won't go any further than calling themselves national conservatives.
Right.
They still are subservient to NATO interests. For those of you who don't know, national conservatism is a kind of template by which Eastern Mediterraneans try to install governments that will at least cooperate with them at a party-to-party level throughout the world. So the first successful candidate that has kind of been elevated and rather than converted in office to national conservatism, as ANGLOZoomer pointed out earlier, Italy's Giorgia Meloni. And there have been other kind of elite conversions like the Fidesz party in Hungary.
Mm-hmm. And peace in Poland.
So they still are internationally subservient. They don't want, the difference perhaps between national conservatism and an authentic nationalism is that the interests of the native citizens don't come first, that there are other foreign policy intrigues that are first among equals in that alliance. But I did notice during National Conservatism Conference in Brussels, which took place with, I believe, just a month after the special military operation in the Ukraine took off, that while they were, NatCon is also a big tent. It's kind of like America First, and that there's a lot of different interests that have aligned around a singular figure for opposite reasons, of course. But there were, at least, I don't want to say supporters of Russia, because that's kind of a media intrigue, right? The media wants you to think that people are being disloyal to their home country. They weren't opposed to just natural geopolitics, right? And they are not. You don't have to be an isolationist necessarily. All these smears that we have to kind of break people's brainwashing out of, right? That the media is complicit in. So they it's not that they support Putin. It's just that they understand the geopolitical realities of things that happen far from our shores. Mm-hmm. And that our sphere of influence is actually not ours. It's the sphere of influence of a cabal of dual citizen elites that rule from skyscrapers in Wall Street and the city of London, etc.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with the native imperatives of the citizens of these countries. And at the same time, you have groups in Central and Western Europe that deprive their modern understanding of nationhood. Some of these conservative parties in places like Poland and the Czech Republic, as a result of the intercession of the United States against the Soviet Union. And so they still see themselves as clients because they don't want to re-enter the sphere of influence of Russia, because to them, they are going to lose their power. They are allies of the Western regimes, and they are currently in power in these countries, so they come down as pro-NATO. They see NATO as a means of maintaining the power in their own countries. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that has anything to do with, and this is always kind of the populist dichotomy, right, is elites are necessary to orchestrate statecraft and matters of stewardship over the population. But if they're truly not acting in the intent of stewarding over the issues of citizens, what Saylor calls like citizenism rather than nationalism,
right,
as a kind of a softer way to frame it, then you have these NatCon tempests in a teapot where you have, let's just say in the media framing, pro-Russian members of the National Conservatism Conference, and then you have pro-NATO members. And it had to be hammered out by Yoram Hazony, the founding father and leader of national conservatism, that they were, in fact, as a matter of policy, pro-NATO. Mm-hmm. So even the national conservatives don't offer a there's a sense of the term nativist that is used as a dog whistle, but in its original understanding, it's that all matters of the state should be done in the national interest, in the interest of its citizens. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So without that being the case with national conservatism, and perhaps we'll see if they line up, certainly some factions of NatCon have lined up behind DeSantis, it's like based color revolution stuff.